What if I told you that the expensive, ultra-sensitive ice fishing rod you saved up for is actually the main reason you're going home empty-handed? It sounds crazy, I know, but today we're diving deep into a very controversial idea. Your best winter rod might be lying to you. It could be actively hiding bites, especially the light ones that matter most. By the end of this video, you are going to look at your fishing gear in a completely new way. We're going to uncover the one crucial element that most manufacturers get wrong, and I promise you it has nothing to do with the color of the rod tip. So before we get into it, let me ask you a question you can answer down in the comments. Do you believe a softer, more flexible tip always means more sensitivity? Let's see if you still think so in about 10 minutes. For as long as most of us have been fishing, we've been told the same thing. The key to successful winter fishing is a rod with a super flexible, brightly colored tip. We call them noodle rods, spring bobbers, quiver tips. The name changes, but the idea is the same. We're taught to watch that tip like a hawk. If it even breathes funny, you set the hook. The entire fishing industry has been built around this idea, marketing rods as hypersensitive or ultralight, based almost entirely on how much that little tip wiggles. It's what our granddads did, it's what the guys in the magazines do, but what if the tip isn't the whole story? What if, by focusing all our attention on what we can see, we've completely ignored the most important sense we have for detecting a bite? We're talking about the sense of touch. And what if that very thing we think is helping us see the bite is actually preventing us from feeling it? Let's start with what I call the great deception of the noodle rod. Picture it in your mind, or maybe you have one sitting in your garage right now. It's that rod with an incredibly thin, flimsy tip that bends if a fly lands on it. We see it bend, and our brain immediately thinks, wow, that's sensitive. We believe that if a tiny minnow so much as sneezes on our lure, that tip is going to signal it to us loud and clear. This is the core belief that sells millions of these rods every single year. The visual feedback is undeniable. You can tap it with your finger and watch it dance. It seems logical, it seems intuitive, but this is the first and most critical misunderstanding in winter fishing. We are confusing flexibility with sensitivity. They are not the same thing. In fact, in many cases, they are complete opposites. That extreme flexibility is a visual cue, yes, but it comes at a massive cost to the actual transmission of information from the fish to your hand, which is where the real bite detection happens. This brings us to a critical distinction you have to understand: the difference between seeing a bite and feeling a bite. They are two completely different games, using two different sensory systems. Seeing a bite relies on watching your rod tip or a spring bobber move. It's a passive activity. You're waiting for an external indicator to tell you what's happening 50 feet below the ice. Feeling a bite, on the other hand, is a tactile experience. It's a direct message sent from the fish to your fingertips. It's a tick, a thump, or even just a change in pressure that you register instantly. In almost every situation, feeling is faster, more precise, and more reliable than seeing. Your nervous system can react to a touch stimulus in milliseconds, long before your brain has fully processed a visual change and sent a signal to your arm to set the hook. When we talk about reaction time, a felt bite gives you a huge advantage, especially when fish are just lightly mouthing the bait and spitting it out in a fraction of a second. To understand why this is, we need to talk about some very simple physics. Don't worry, I'm not going to throw a bunch of equations at you. Just think of it like this. When a fish bites your lure, it creates a small burst of energy. This energy creates a vibration that travels up your fishing line. The goal of a truly sensitive fishing rod is to act as a conductor, a highway for that vibration. It needs to transmit that energy with as little interruption as possible. from the line through the rod's guides, down the main shaft of the rod, what we call the blank, and into the handle where your hand is waiting. Every component of the rod can either help that signal along or weaken it. A good, sensitive rod is like a tightly pulled wire. A bad one is like a wet noodle. One carries a signal perfectly, the other one just absorbs it. The entire game of sensitivity is about efficient energy transfer. That's it. It's about getting that little tick from the fish's mouth to your brain in the most direct way possible. So, where does that super flexible noodle tip fit into this energy transfer system? Well, here's the painful truth. It acts as a shock absorber. Think about the suspension on your truck. Its entire purpose is to absorb bumps and vibrations from the road so that you don't feel them in the driver's seat. That's exactly what an overly flexible rod tip does. When a light biting perch taps your jig, that little burst of energy travels up the line and hits the rod tip first. Instead of passing that energy cleanly down the rest of the rod, the floppy tip just, well, it wobbles. It absorbs the energy and dampens it. It's like shouting into a pillow. The initial force is dissipated right there at the tip, and only a tiny fraction of it, if any, ever makes it down the rod blank to your hand. You might see the tip twitch a little, but you will feel absolutely nothing. That shock absorber is effectively robbing you of the most valuable information you can get. Let me give you a real-world example that makes this perfectly clear. Think about a guitar string. When you have a guitar string pulled tight and you pluck it, it vibrates with a clear, sharp tone. The energy travels efficiently through that tight medium. Now, what happens if you take that same string and make it completely loose and floppy? If you pluck it now, you get nothing, maybe a dull thwomp. It just wobbles silently. It doesn't have the tension, the stiffness, to carry that vibration and turn it into sound. Your fishing rod works on the exact same principle. A stiff, high modulus graphite rod, blank, is like that tightly pulled guitar string. It's a perfect conductor for vibration. The noodle rod tip is the loose, floppy string. It's a terrible conductor. The very quality we've been told to look for, flexibility, is the exact quality that kills the transfer of the bite's energy. This is why we need to shift our focus away from the tip and onto the heart of the rod, the blank. The blank is the main shaft of the rod from the handle up to where the flimsy tip might be attached. This is your information highway. The material it's made from is everything. The two most common materials are fiberglass and graphite. Fiberglass is durable and flexible, but it is a poor transmitter of vibration. It has a slow parabolic action that tends to absorb energy. Graphite, on the other hand, especially high modulus graphite, is incredibly light, stiff, and dense. It transmits vibrations with stunning efficiency. When a fish even breathes on a lure tied to a high-quality graphite blank, you can feel it. The choice of blank material is far more important to true tactile sensitivity than anything else. A rod with a premium graphite blank and a slightly stiffer tip will let you feel things that a fiberglass noodle rod would completely hide from you. Ultimately, the final destination for all this information is your hand. Your hand, connected to your brain, is the most sophisticated bite detector on the planet. Nothing man-made can compete with it. So, the entire purpose of your rod and line is to serve as an extension of your nervous system. You want to feel like you are literally touching the lure with your fingertips. Any part of the system that dampens, delays, or deadens the signal is a weak link that needs to be eliminated. That soft tip is often the weakest link in the entire chain. It's an unnecessary buffer between the fish and your primary sensor, your hand. If you're holding the rod, you shouldn't be looking for a signal. You should be wired directly into it. The goal is to make the rod disappear, to feel that direct connection to the business end of the line. A floppy tip only adds noise and interference to that connection. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. But what about fish with soft mouths like crappies? A stiff rod will just rip the hook right out. This is probably the number one counter-argument, and it comes from a misunderstanding of two different rod characteristics: sensitivity and action. Sensitivity is the rod's ability to transmit vibration. As we've discussed, this comes from a stiff, dense, blank material like graphite. Action, on the other hand, is how and where the rod bends when you put a load on it, like when you're fighting a fish. You can have a rod that is extremely sensitive but still has a fast or extra fast action, meaning only the top third or quarter of the rod bends. This provides a soft enough cushion to protect light wire hooks and keep a fish pinned without sacrificing that all-important feel. You don't need a wet noodle from handle to tip to protect a crappie's mouth. You need a well-designed rod with a sensitive blank and an appropriate action. Let's move down the rod a little bit to the part you're actually holding, the handle. This is your final point of contact, and it plays a huge role in sensitivity. Think about it. The vibration has traveled all the way down the blank. The handle is the last thing it passes through before it gets to your nerves. The material of that handle is critical. Many modern rods use soft, cushy, EVA foam grips. They feel comfortable, sure, but that soft foam is yet another vibration killer. It's like putting a foam mattress between you and the bite. The best materials for transmitting feel are dense and hard. High-quality, dense cork is excellent. Even better are the modern carbon fiber handles or reel seats that leave part of the rod blank exposed so your fingers can touch it directly. This gives you the purest, most undiluted signal possible. A comfortable, squishy handle might feel nice, but it's making your rod deaf. Here is a simple experiment you can do right now at home to prove this to yourself. Grab your favorite ice fishing rod, close your eyes and hold it by the handle, just like you would on the ice. Have a friend or family member go to the other end and tap the very tip of the rod as lightly as they can with their fingernail. Try to feel that vibration in the handle. Now do it again, but this time move your hand up and grip the bare rod blank just above the handle or reel seat. Have them do the exact same light tap on the tip. I will bet you anything that the difference is night and day. The vibration you feel when you're touching the blank directly will be 10 times sharper and more distinct than what you felt through the cork or foam handle. This demonstrates just how much information is lost through dampening materials, and you want to minimize those materials between you and the fish. Of course, the rod is only one part of this system. We also have to talk about your fishing line for a moment. The line is the very first leg of the journey for that bite vibration. If your line is a poor conductor, it doesn't matter how good your rod is. The signal will be dead before it even gets there. This is why monofilament line is a terrible choice for sensitivity. It has a huge amount of stretch, which acts, you guessed it, like another shock absorber. A fish can pick up your jig and the mono will just stretch without sending a clear signal. For maximum feel, you want a line with virtually zero stretch. That means a high-quality braided line, or if you're a purist, a fluorocarbon main line. Braid is the king of sensitivity. It transmits every single bump, scrape, and tap directly to your rod. Using a short fluorocarbon leader will give you invisibility near the lure while preserving almost all of the sensitivity of the braid. So after all of this, is there ever a good time to use a soft noodle rod or a spring bobber? Absolutely. But only in very specific situations. Their strength is in visual bite detection, not tactile sensitivity. Therefore, they are an excellent tool for dead sticking. That's when you have a second rod set up in a holder usually with a live minnow, and you are not holding it. In that scenario, you are relying 100% on your eyes. A flexible tip will clearly show you when a fish has picked up the bait and is swimming off with it. It's also useful for a technique called tight-lining panfish, where the fish suck in a bait and the soft tip provides very little resistance, giving them the confidence to hold on. But notice the common theme. In both of these cases, you are not actively holding the rod and jigging. The moment you pick up the rod, the rules change completely. Let's focus on the main scenario for most ice anglers. You're sitting on a bucket, actively jigging a lure with the rod in your hand. This is where a stiffer, more sensitive rod isn't just an advantage, it's a necessity. When you're imparting action to a small tungsten jig or a spoon, you need to feel everything. You need to feel the lure hit the bottom. You need to feel it brush up against a piece of weed. And most importantly, you need to feel that incredibly subtle tick when a perch or a walleye inhales it on the fall. That bite often feels like nothing more than your line hitting a single strand of a spider web. A noodle rod will completely absorb that feeling. The tip might twitch, but by the time you see it and react, the fish has already spit the hook. With a stiff graphite rod, that tick feels like a jolt of electricity straight to your hand. Your reaction is instant. Another huge problem with soft tips is how they handle the dreaded up bite. This is extremely common with crappies. They often approach a lure from below, and as they eat it, they continue to swim upwards. What happens to your line? It goes slack. On a noodle rod with a heavy bend in it from the lure's weight, this is a very slow, subtle signal. The tip just slowly unloads and straightens out. It's easy to miss, and it can look like you just moved the rod yourself. On a stiffer rod, however, the signal is immediate and unmistakable. The rod tip doesn't just unload, the entire rod suddenly feels weightless in your hand. The sensation of your lure's weight completely vanishing is a much more powerful and urgent signal to your brain than watching a rod tip slowly rise by half an inch. You feel the weightlessness and you set the hook, often catching fish you never would have known were there. Let's take a specific fish, the walleye, as a perfect case study. Winter walleyes are notorious for having one of the most difficult to detect bites in freshwater fishing. Often, it's not a thump at all. It might feel like your jig just got a little heavy or mushy, as if you snagged a wet leaf. Other times, it's a faint tick that is so light, you'll convince yourself it was just your imagination. To consistently catch winter walleyes, you need a rod that is an absolute telegraph of information. You need a stiff, high modulus graphite blank that transmits every single nuance from the deep. A rod that dampens vibration like a noodle rod or even a low-quality fiberglass rod will make you miss 99% of these bites. You'll sit there, marking fish on your flasher, wondering why they won't commit, when in reality, they've been biting all along. Your gear was just never telling you. So, if we were to design the ultimate feel rod based on this philosophy, what would it look like? Forget the flashy colors and gimmicks. First, it would start with a high modulus, fast-action graphite blank. This is the engine of the entire system. Second, it would have a minimal reel seat, preferably one that leaves a portion of the blank exposed for your fingers to touch. Third, the handle would be made of a dense, high-grade material like premium cork or lightweight carbon fiber. Absolutely no soft, squishy foam. Fourth, it would have small, lightweight guides that add minimal weight to the blank and transfer line vibration efficiently. The result wouldn't be a rod that looks impressive because of how much it wobbles. It would be a stark, lightweight, rigid tool. It would feel less like a fishing rod and more like a surgeon's scalpel, designed for one thing and one thing only, to transmit information with perfect clarity. This leads to a complete shift in how you diagnose a tough day on the ice. The next time you're out there and your sonar is lit up with fish, but you're not getting any bites, I want you to stop and ask yourself a question. Instead of immediately blaming the fish and saying they have lockjaw, ask, is it possible I'm getting bit but my equipment is failing to tell me? It's a humbling question, but it can be a game changer. The fish are often more cooperative than we give them credit for. They are constantly interacting with our lures in small, subtle ways. The problem is that we've been using tools that are designed to filter out all but the most aggressive hook-setting bites. We've been fishing with earplugs in, essentially. By switching to a system designed for maximum feel, you suddenly start hearing the whole conversation that's happening down there. Let me paint you a picture. I was out with my buddy Dave last winter. Dave is a great fisherman, but he's old school. He swears by his trusty noodle rod that he's had for 20 years. I was trying out a new, stiff graphite rod. We found a huge school of perch on the flasher, stacked up from bottom to 10 feet up. For the first 20 minutes, Dave is getting frustrated. They're just looking at it, he says. They won't commit. Meanwhile, I'm feeling these tiny little ticks on the line. They weren't bites you could see. His rod tip wasn't moving at all. But I could feel them plain as day through the graphite. I pulled up 5 or 6 perch before he even got his first real, aggressive bite. The difference wasn't the lure, the spot, or the angler. The difference was that my rod was a telegraph and his was a sponge. His rod was absorbing the very information he needed to be successful. What this all boils down to is a fundamental transition in your thinking as an angler. I want you to try to stop looking for the bite and start feeling for it. It changes everything. It transforms ice fishing from a passive waiting game into a much more active, engaged experience. You become hyper-aware of your lure. You feel every rock it bumps, every change in bottom composition. Your brain is constantly processing a stream of information from your fingertips. You are no longer just a spectator watching a colorful tip. You are an active participant in what's happening at the end of your line. This active mindset not only helps you detect more bites, but also makes you a better angler overall. You learn more about the structure you're fishing and how the fish are reacting to your jigging cadence in real time. It's a more connected and, frankly, a more exciting way to fish. So, here is your challenge. I'm not asking you to throw away all your old rods. I am asking you to conduct an honest experiment for yourself. The next time you go out on the ice, take 2 rods with you. One can be your favorite, trusted, soft-tipped noodle rod. For the other one, find the stiffest, lightest rod you own. Maybe it's a walleye jigging rod you thought was too heavy for panfish. Rig them both up with the same line and the same lure. Fish them side by side over the same hole. Spend 10 minutes with one, then 10 minutes with the other. But when you use the stiffer rod, make a conscious effort to ignore the tip. Close your eyes if you have to. Focus 100% of your attention on what your fingers are telling you. Pay attention to the ticks, the weight changes, the subtle signals. I am confident that you will be absolutely shocked by what you've been missing. So to wrap it all up, the big, shocking takeaway is this. The fishing industry for years has sold us on the idea that a wobbly, ultra-flexible tip is the key to sensitivity. But for the vast majority of us who actively hold our rods and jig, that soft tip can be a vibration-killing shock absorber that lies to us. The real secret, the aha moment, is that true sensitivity isn't in what you see. It's in the clean, uninterrupted transfer of energy. It's a system from the lure up a no-stretch line through a stiff graphite blank and telegraphed directly into your hand. Your rod shouldn't be a visual indicator. It should be a direct extension of your nervous system. Making this simple shift in your gear and your mindset can absolutely be the difference between a frustrating day of marking fish and a fantastic day of catching them. You will start cashing in on all those subtle bites you never even knew were happening. Thank you so much for watching. If this video blew your mind a little bit or challenged what you thought you knew, do me a solid and hit that like button. And please subscribe for more content that goes against the grain. We truly appreciate your support. Now I have to ask you, after hearing all this, are you willing to give a stiffer rod an honest try this winter? Or are you a die-hard noodle rod fan for life? Let's get a real debate going in the comments below.